right, second graders, are you guys ready for our Mola project? I want to show you an example of how it's going to look at the end. Of course, yours is going to look unique to you, but it's going to be an animal and it's going to have lots of patterns and bright colors and stitching and lots of geometric shapes, just like the molas that we studied in our lesson. Okay, so the supplies that you need to gather are a template for a few different animals that you can choose from. This is on the website that your grown-up can print out for you. If you're unable to print it out, you can design your own animal and just make sure that it's about that size, about a quarter of a page. I like to have a little scrap paper handy when I'm doing this project to glue on, just so I don't make a mess on the table. You're going to need some color pencils in a few different colors. Some bright and some darker is great. A regular pencil, some kind of glue, either a white glue or a glue stick, a pair of scissors, and then construction paper in a few different colors. You're probably going to want at least 4 pages. Get some bright, fun colors, and ones that contrast with each other are great. And let's get started. If you again need to pause the video and go gather your materials, or if I'm moving too fast, don't be afraid to pause, rewind, whatever you need to do to not try to keep up with me, but just hear the instruction and then pause it and work on your own time. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is take your stencil sheet and you're going to choose the animal that you want. Since I already did a rooster, because chickens are my favorite animal. Do you guys want to meet my chickens really fast? I think it'd be fun to go meet my chickens. Hey, say hi, Penny. She's a little camera shy. Oh. Here's my chicken, Liberty. Say hi, Liberty. Here's my chicken, Eliza. Eliza's a sweet little soft little girl. Say hi, Eliza. Well, now that you've met my chickens, we can move on with the project. Let's see, I think I'll just choose the turtle. Okay, so you want to cut out the animal that you've chosen kind of right along the outside line, okay? Okay, we've got our animal cut out. Now the next thing you want to do is choose the color that you want your animal to be. Okay, so I'm going to choose, I think I'm going to choose orange. Now, if I were trying to be realistic, I might choose green because that's kind of the color turtles are, but this is abstract art, so I can make it any color I want. So I'm going to choose a corner of my paper. Again, if I use the middle of my paper, then I might not be able to use very much of the rest of this, and we're going to want to save our scraps and use the rest of our paper later on. So I'm going to put him in the corner and then just trace around the animal. And then cut that out. Okay, now my animal's cut out. I want to save my scrap paper again because we're going to be using that later on in the project. Okay, so with my animal cut out, I want to then look at my other colors I have and pick a color that contrasts really well. Okay, so the black contrast means it's very different from. So the black and the orange contrast very well because the orange is a little bit light and the black is very dark. How's the contrast on the red? Decent, but it's not as much, right? How's the contrast on the green? It's really good. So try to pick a color that contrasts well and think about how different the colors are and how easy it is to see those lines between them. I think I'm going to do green. Okay, now where I traced on my animal, there's some pencil lines left, and you might have those too. A really easy way to get rid of those is to just turn it upside down and use the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my scrap paper that I had from before to glue on. And of course, when I'm using glue, I'm not going to get it super blobby, dobby, gobby, ooey gooey, messy, right? I'm just going to use tiny little drops of glue kind of around the edges. And a few in the middle. That's all I need, okay? No big blobs. If it's hard for you not to do big blobs, then maybe try to use a glue stick. That makes it a little easier to stay tidy. Now, when you're setting this down, don't put it right on the edge of the paper. Move it in at least a pencil width, okay? Or maybe easier to do a finger width, okay? So again, I've got space here between the edge of my animal and the edge of my paper, and I can push it down. Okay. Now, I'm going to do a bubble cut now. Now, a bubble cut means that instead of cutting right against the line, I'm going to leave some space, at least a pencil width or a finger width, and I'm going to not worry too much about being super precise, but I can kind of just cut around, leaving a space on the edge. You don't need to draw the line first, but if you want to, you could. But I find it easier just to cut, and as I cut along, I'm always making sure that there's space between the edge of my animal shape and where I'm cutting. Okay, so you should end up with something like that. You have your animal, it's glued down onto a paper, and you bubble cut around the edge. Now we're going to do the same thing again. So again, set it down and see what contrasts well. Do red and green contrast well? Pretty well. They're complementary colors because they're straight across from each other on the color wheel. That means they also look nice together. Let's try it on black. Pretty well it contrasts pretty well also. I think I am going to use black on this one. So same thing. I'm going to just do a light amount of glue around the edges and a little bit in the middle, and I'm going to glue it down onto my second paper. When I do this, same as last time, I'm going to leave a little bit of an edge on all of the sides. So I'm not going to bring it right to the edge, I'm going to leave some space. And same thing again. All right, there we go. So we have our animal 3 ways now. Now, I want you to go through the colors that you have and decide which 2 colors you'd like to have for a background. Okay, so I think I'm gonna do orange and red because they're the 2 that I have the biggest sheets left of still. Now we want to make this rectangle paper into a square. So I'll show you how. You're going to take one corner of your paper, and it's going to be the long edge on top, the short edge on side. You're going to take one corner and fold it down, and you're going to check on the bottom edge. You can fold it gently to check where that's going to be. And right here is going to be where I want to make a mark. Okay, right there. Now, my mark is right there. I'm going to fold this side of my paper over to where that mark is. And then I'm going to make sure these 2 edges are lined up. Okay, if it's crooked like that, then you're going to get a crooked line on this side too. So you want to make sure these 2 edges are just lined up and that it's folded where your mark is. And then you're going to push down, starting on this side that you folded on, and push the whole thing. Okay, now if that didn't go well, don't stress about it. This is art, this is fun, you can try again. But what you should see is that your mark has a straight line going all the way up to the top now. Now you can cut along this line to get your square, or you can fold it back and forth several times and just tear it. So that's up to you. I'm just gonna tear mine very gently. I fold it back and forth so that this line is really creased and folded, and then I'm gonna gently tear. If you wanna try that, you can. It's possible that it'll tear into your square and that might make you sad. So if you wanna cut it, that's fine too. Saving all my scraps. Okay, so now I have my very background color. It's gonna be red. Now I'm gonna show you how to make, let's see, let's use this one. I'm gonna show you how to make the inside border. What we're doing is creating a background color and then a main panel color and leaving a little border around. So I'm gonna show you how to make what's on here, the green piece. On here it's gonna be an orange piece, okay? So what I want you to do is put your two papers together like this. If we were in class, I would just be able to cut these for you and pass them out the right size. That would be a lot easier, right? But we're doing the best we can. So we're just gonna offset this. Offset means push to the side a little bit, at least the width of your pencil or the width of your finger on two sides. Okay, now what that leaves us with is that we need to cut a square this size, but we don't want to just cut it because we don't know exactly where to, and it probably won't make a very straight line. So I'm going to show you the best I can how to do this, okay? If there's a grown-up that wants to help you with this, they can help too. So I'm going to look at this orange, and I'm going to know that I want my orange to stop about here, because that will leave me my pencil width on this side. Okay, now I'm going to scooch my paper down and do it on the other side. So I have my pencil width border on here and here, and I know that on my orange I want my paper to stop about there. That will give me a pencil width on this side. So now I have a mark here and a mark here that will show us where we want to either cut or tear our paper on that side. Okay, so I'm going to line up my mark on this side. It's right there. And I'm going to line up my mark on this side. It's right there. And then I'm going to fold this. And now, like I did before, you could fold it back and forth until it's nice and creased and then tear it. Or you could cut. And I'll just show you cutting this time just so you can see how. You guys know how to cut a straight paper. All right, there we go. So now we have the right size going this way, but what about this way? It's still too long on this side, right? So we're going to do the exact same thing on this side. We're going to say, where do we want our orange paper to end? Right about there. And where do we want our orange paper to end on this side? Right about there. Okay? Now, you can do that different ways. You can get a ruler and draw a line across and cut it. You can fold it and draw a line across and cut it. I'll just fold mine right there and right there. And cut it. These molas, as you learned in the lecture video, are handmade, and so one thing that's cool about making art that looks handmade is that if your lines aren't perfectly straight, or it's not a perfect square, or you tore it and so it has a little rough edge like that, that's okay, because that just adds to the handmade feel of it. And these are handcrafted. Molas are handcrafted, and not every single line is perfectly straight, and that's okay. That kind of improves the look of it, in my opinion. Okay, so now we have our background all set. We're just going to glue these two pieces of paper together. Again, just a little glue, right? Now we get to glue our animal right into the middle of that. How's it look, boys and girls? Are you liking the way it's looking? Now comes the fun part. We get to decorate and add our patterns like we learned about in the video. The molas when they're designing and creating the molas, there's hardly ever just blank area in the background. They fill it all with beautiful shapes and colors and patterns. Okay, so we want to remember a few key words as we're doing this. The first is shapes, right? We looked at how some were filled with triangles in the background. We looked at how some had kind of more curvy shapes to fill the area. We looked at how some had stripes or long rectangles to fill the areas in the background. So we can choose between those different shapes, and we looked at patterns. And so if I just had a red strip going this way and then one that way and then a triangle over here, they would all be different and they wouldn't be a pattern. So the things that make it a pattern is that it repeats. And so triangle, 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 but each one is turned a different way, right? So as you repeat these shapes, it creates patterns. So those are the two things we want to remember. We want to remember our shapes, and that if we repeat them, they'll make a pattern. That's what we want to do. So we get to fill these blank spaces with shapes now, and I want to show you a couple tricks of how to cut your shape pieces quickly, and so that you don't have to spend too long cutting. Okay, so let's look at our green paper, and I'll show you how to cut a whole bunch of strips at once. Okay, so I'm gonna get a small section. Now, if I want to cut strips like these red ones that I have here, it would take a long time to cut each one out individually, so I'll show you a special trick to cut them out fast. Okay, you get your scissors and you just cut them all the way to the end of your scissors and just leave it a little flap like that. Do that to the whole sheet. To do it. Now they're all attached and the cut ends right about there. So I'm going to go in from the cut a little bit and cut in the opposite direction, and look at what happens. So quickly I got all of these little strip pieces, right? Let me show you another trick for cutting. For example, if you wanted to do some triangles, you can choose how big or little you want your triangles, but let me show you a trick for cutting them quickly. So I'm folding it up this way, and I'm folding it again. And now let's count how many layers we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers in this folded bunch. So every time I cut a triangle out of this, it's going to make 4 triangles, and that makes it really fast to cut a bunch of triangles. So if I cut a triangle here, all of a sudden I have 4 triangles. See how fast that was? And the good thing about triangles is that once you have an angle cut like that, you just need to cut the 2 other sides and you have a new set of 4 triangles. Okay, so I want you to use these techniques so you don't spend tons and tons and tons of time cutting out your shapes. Okay, so I have a bunch of triangles, I have a bunch of lines, and I'm going to start decorating my turtle. I'll show you a tip for gluing down if you have strips like this, or even if you have other shapes other than strips that you know exactly where they're going to go. I want to show you a tip for gluing them down quickly. Okay, you can just do lines straight onto your paper of where you know you want to glue down your strips, and that makes it really fast and easy to put your strips down. The other good thing is that the glue ends where the paper is, and so it's easy to cut off this extra piece if you want. And after you've glued those down, you can cut off the extra bits. Okay, so now my background is pretty well filled with shapes. I could even add other shapes within these larger ones, but I definitely want to add some shapes within my animal. Now these lines are just an idea. You definitely don't need to do anything like that. Here you can see I just added one shape, kind of the shape of a wing inside my rooster, but what I want to do is create some abstract shapes that almost look like pieces of the shell. So, and I think I'll do those in red. And I'm going to use my folding trick to make sure that I'm not taking too long to do these shapes. And then so I have 4 layers. Each one I cut is going to give me 4 shapes. Okay, now I think that's all I'm going to do for my actual shapes. The very last thing, oh, here's my kitty Atlas visiting. Hi, Atlas. Oh, you're such a good kitty. Atlas really likes to help me with my art projects. Okay, now the very last thing that I'm going to do is add some stitching effect. So as you remember, molas are made from fabric and they are stitched together with thick, colorful thread that purposely contrasts. Remember, contrast means how different the 2 colors are and how well they show up against each other. So I've created with my color pencils lines that look like sewing or stitching that contrast with the color that they're on. So I have red on yellow, I have brown on red, I have white on black. Any of those combinations that contrast well will be just fine. So we kind of get to pretend that we're sewing now. So we can pick a color that contrasts well with the one that we're sewing down, and go ahead and stitch the edges. You can do this kind of as much or as little as you want to. You could draw these stitch marks on every single piece if you wanted to, or just a few to kind of show the idea that this is supposed to look like fabric. And when I'm looking for contrasting colors, I know that if my color is very dark, I don't want to use a dark color pencil. I just won't be able to see it at all. So if my color is very dark, I want to try a lighter one. Do you think this yellow will show up well on the black? Pretty good. Another way that you can add a little detail, especially on your animal, is by this stitching color penciling. So I think I might try some of these necklines using stitching. And maybe even an eye. Okay, there you have it. Construction paper and color pencil molas. I hope you enjoyed this project, and if you did, you can use the rest of your animals and try different ones. You can just color in these animals like a coloring page if you like, and try new things. All of the things I teach you and all of the ways I show you to do them, it's good to give it a good try, and then once you're done with it, if something about the way we were doing it you would want to change, or you have an idea how to do something similar but change a few things up, or take that idea and build upon it, that would be wonderful. And I would love to see pictures of the things you create. You can email me, you can have your grown-up help you email me and send me pictures of your work, send me questions, send me feedback on the projects if you're enjoying them or not. I would love to hear from you. Take care, guys. See you next week.